Welcome to one more edition of Encuentro Virtual. Encuentro Virtual is a series where we bring together the community members, professionals, to talk about important topics related to the Latinx community. So today we're going to talk about Latinx community and media. So I have just a few numbers here to explain a little bit the situation, the context, right? So we all know that representation and visibility, it's a big problem, not just nationally, but everywhere, right? When it comes to representation. And according to a 2018 Pew Research study, 77% of the newsroom employees are white and male, and the national workforce is 61. So we have like even higher rates when it comes to media representation. Thank you. And according to another study by Statista, in 2019, 13% of the newsroom workforce were made of African Americans, 10% were Latinx descent, and 2% Asian Americans, and 0.4% Native Americans. So if we sum up all that, it's much less than 40%, which is the makeup of minorities country, which is a number that a lot of people is still still say that it could be more, right? Mm-hmm. Gracias. Entonces vemos que we see that we have, a long way to go, so to have better representation, and not just to talk about Latinx issues, but to advance the career of Latinx producers, reporters, and newsmakers. So to talk about a little bit of all that are here Edgar Ramírez, originally from Santa Catalina, Chinango, in the Mexican state of Oaxaca. He has lived in Philadelphia since 2006. In 2013, he created Philatinos Radio and Philatinos.com, a community project that aims to inform on Latino issues in Philadelphia. Currently, Philatinos Media has 15 volunteers with radio shows and has nearly 2,000 followers. Welcome, Edgar. Bienvenido, Edgar.
Gracias.
So we also have here Gabe Castro, her pronouns she, her, they, them, is a Philadelphia-based Latina multimedia professional specializing in a horror genre. She works at Philadelphia's public access television station, PhilyCAM, as the programming and production coordinator, helping her community make people-powered media. She's also the producer and co-host of the horror media analysis podcast, Ghouls Next Door. Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Ericka Conant, pronounced she, her, ella. She moved to Philadelphia in 2020 from the desert Southwest, a region full of Mexican cultures and the constant blaze from the sun. She currently writes politics and features for Alia News, where she covered the 2020 elections and vaccine rollout in the city. She's also a member of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and she keeps on top of the latest issues impacting Latinx in the United States. Welcome, Ericka.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
Wonderful. All right. So first, I wanted to get to know a little bit of you growing up. You all come from different backgrounds. Edgar, he's from Mexico, Oaxaca, and he came here, I believe, later than Ericka in her stage of life. And Gabe was born here in the US. So we have all these different perspectives, these different layers. And I'd love to know, growing up, how did you feel represented by mainstream media?
Bueno, como lo dicen ahí, yo llegué a Filadelfia en el 2006. Habían 4 periódicos latinos, todos colombianos. Uno solo era mexicano, hispano, que ya desapareció el año pasado, pero que realmente era muy puertorriqueño. Entonces realmente no había representación para los latinos de la primera generación que eran mexicanos. Entonces realmente nunca fuimos reflejados durante ese periodo, ¿no? Y bueno, los medios de comunicación masivos pues nunca se esfuerzan en representar a los latinos, ya tienen su target, entonces no están muy interesados. Y la cuestión del radio también era inexistente, había radio comercial pero solo con música. Entonces, a la hora de información, pues realmente era inexistente.
Yeah, the great thing that, gracias Edgar, viene, tú traes una perspectiva desde muy local y desde 2006. Entonces estamos hablando de que 15 años atrás, ¿verdad?
Claro.
Excelente. Y entonces quería escuchar un poco de Gabe. Gabe, now that we heard a little bit about how was Edgar's experience like 15 years ago, how did you feel represented by mainstream media growing up?
Yeah, I am originally from a small town in Florida, Central Florida. So not even the places that have a larger Latina population in Florida. And so I didn't have anyone in my area that looked like me or spoke like me. And moving up to Philadelphia, the reason why I stayed here after school was because at least the population, I could find a community there. But I agree with Edgar in that they're growing up and seeing any mainstream TV, like there's no one that looks like me. And if they did, they all played a very specific role. And, you know, that's a part of what we do at PhilyCAM and having our PhilyCAM Latino program is to try to, you know, give tools to Latino filmmakers and creators to start creating that content to get out so that the future generations don't have to see themselves, you know, not reflected in the media.
So how about you, Ericka? Where did you grow up and how did you feel represented by mainstream media?
Thank you. Thanks again for having me. No, it's been great hearing all of your backgrounds and especially like coming right after Gabe. It's crazy because like you say, oh, I lived in Central Florida and nobody looked like me or nobody was like from my background. And I grew up in like Southern California, like southeast of San Diego in a town called El Centro. And everybody was Mexican. So that's like a really like sharp contrast, I would say. Like we felt very comfortable every day among ourselves in classes. Like I took like a newspaper class in high school and it was very like, you kind of felt like a sense of, you don't feel like you don't fit in, I would say. But I didn't feel that kind of fish out of water kind of feeling until I went to college to a predominantly white school. And then you realize like it's different out there in some spaces. But so yeah, did journalism there. And that's when you realize like your peers aren't always going to be from your background. You're not ever going to feel completely comfortable with them. It was like a really big learning curve, I would say. So it wasn't until moving back to the desert Southwest and getting my first news job there when people were kind of, I would say it was a mix, but there was kind of more of that familiarity, I would say. And then coming to Aldea now where there's even kind of more of that comfort, but just to end, it's kind of interesting how, you know, you have to go to these specific like Latinx, Latina spaces to kind of feel a little bit more comfortable. So I just thought that was interesting, like hearing from you guys.
Now, generally speaking, what do you think non-Latino media outlets can do better when covering the Latinx community? Let's switch it up. Let's start with Ericka now.
Okay. I think that what non-Latino or like mainstream media should do is look at outlets that are kind of like what we're doing. Like whether it be looking at like, I'm thinking of larger Latino outlets like Latino Rebels, if they're trying to do something more nationwide, kind of see what these, I would say these perspectives are like right off the bat, instead of just immediately looking for the kind of the bigger picture and like what's gonna like fit in with everybody, you know, in terms of coverage. And then that means like listening to like journalists that are from those backgrounds. Like if you're gonna be reporting on what's happening in Puerto Rico, like don't just listen to somebody that, you know, oh, I read a book on Puerto Rico, like do this, like, you know, like listen to the journalists that are from there. And I think that's what's missing, because then what happens is it just leaves too much room for generalizations, and then people kind of get this like facile view of like what's happening in different places, and they think they know everything, but it's not true. Like even me, like sometimes I'm put into positions where I have to, like at a Latino news outlet, there's a small staff, so I'll have to like cover something on Puerto Rico, and like I'm not from there, coming from like a majority Mexican background. You know, I had to do a lot of research, and it's about speaking to people like here in the community, like Philly Boricuas, and kind of get a perspective from there. So there's some kind of like in touch aspect about it, or else you can tell that it's completely out of touch. So that's what I mean, kind of just going more directly to the sources.
Gracias. What about you, Gabe? What do you think non-Latino media outlets can do better when covering the Latinx community?
Yeah, I agree completely with what Ericka said. In going to the sources, having a collaboration, and kind of teaming up and having that, but also making space for and opportunities for Latinx creators and people who are knowledgeable in that to have that space to be reporting on or creating content that they can speak on. And we need more of that. Like we need more opportunities. We need more people in writer's room or newsrooms who can speak on that. Because even just like, with what Ericka said, like even in a completely like Latino newsroom, like you have the wherewithal to be like, okay, I don't know all this about Puerto Rico, so I need to kind of do my research, but non-Latino people don't even know that they should be doing that. And so even just having that voice that's like, hold on, like you need to take a step and actually know what you're talking about or know what is important to those people, know how to represent and control that narrative. Because we just kind of get a lot of the same recycled stories if we have the same people telling those stories. It's like, Adrienne Marie Brown had written about, how we rotate crops in order to like, keep the soil like sustained and fresh and healthy. And if we have the same people creating content, the same people saying the same stories, then that crop is going to die eventually after so long. And so to get new stories and to get stories that are appropriately covered, we honestly just need to put people in those seats and in those rooms to tell those stories.
Edgar, so ¿qué te parece que los medios de noticias no latinos, cómo ellos pueden mejorar su reporte de la comunidad latina?
Bueno, no solamente los no latinos, Gabriela. Yo tengo la experiencia hace 10 años cuando la comunidad mexicana crecía. Te digo, había 4 periódicos no mexicanos. Entonces, en alguna ocasión invité a El Hispano, que el dueño era mexicano, para cubrir la noticia del primer padre mexicano en Filadelfia. Aquel día habían varios, entre el padre y varios que estaban estudiando, y cuando hacen la nota, ponen una nota que dice el primer padre mexicano del barrio para el barrio. Hasta ahí todo estaba bien, ¿no? De hecho, el lenguaje es del pueblo para el pueblo, pero lo más increíble fue que pusieron a un padre morenito, y el padre que realmente era el padre era un mexicano con ojos verdes, con la piel blanca. Y entonces a veces los medios suponen que si eres moreno, por lo tanto eres mexicano, ¿no? Entonces, no solamente los no latinos. Yo he participado en una campaña desde hace algunos años en donde le pedimos a los medios que no solamente seamos las víctimas o los victimarios, porque así es como nos representan normalmente en las películas, en las noticias. Y en el caso concreto de Filadelfia, en cuestión en español, pues no tenemos algo que sea diario, un semanario que las noticias dejan de interesar, ¿verdad? Entonces creo que habría mucho que por conocer a la comunidad para poderla informar debidamente.
Y bueno, hablando, we can talk more about being a Latinx reporter or a news producer or media maker, like you guys are. Can you tell me the focus of your organization, how its reporting is addressing the needs of the Latinx community? because again, you have different approaches, like Edgar, it's from a community media, Aldea, it's more of a mainstream, and PhilyCAM, it's a public access. So I would like to know the differences and how does that, cover Latinx community.
¿Empiezo?
Sí.
Bueno, lo que nosotros hacemos es hablar de lo que sucede en la ciudad. Nos hemos inscrito a cualquier boletín que nos pueda brindar información, pero sobre todo es que vamos y preguntamos también, ¿no? Afortunadamente, Philatinos tiene muchos voluntarios y cada uno hace cosas para saber lo que está ocurriendo. Normalmente todos en español, entonces a veces las fuentes vienen de traducciones. Y también lo que hacemos es escribir algunas notas a través de nuestra página en philatinos.com. Y otra de las cosas que hacemos es también recolectar información y pasárselo a la gente, no solamente por la radio o sino de boca a boca, ¿no? Tenemos varios grupos para informar esa parte. Lo que realmente hemos hecho es cambiar un poco esa narrativa o esos argumentos de que la comunidad latina, yo siempre me refiero a la comunidad mexicana porque vivo en el sur, desde otra perspectiva, ¿no? Lo que estamos aportando, porque a veces la falta de información, los demás creen que los inmigrantes de primera generación vienen a recibir, ¿no? Entonces, tratamos de fortalecer su orgullo latino y a través de sus aportaciones.
Y Edgar, ¿me puedes decir cuáles son las principales dificultades que encuentras para realizar tu trabajo?
Bueno, yo creo que el financiamiento, la parte financiera, ¿no? Y creo que todos los medios latinos no disponen de un presupuesto. También la capacitación, la mayoría de los participantes en Philatinos son voluntarios. Claro, muchos llevan más de 5 años, entonces a partir de la práctica han aprendido, ¿no? También hemos tomado algunos talleres. Pero sí, la dificultad es la parte de producir buen material, tener un presupuesto para poder lograrlo.
So I think a good segue will be going to Gabe, because it's a public access media. So can you tell me more about the focus of the organization, how it addresses the needs of Latinx community, Gabe?
Yes, so PhilyCAM is the community access media station. We have TV and radio. Edgar produces for us. He has a show on our station. And so as public access, we are, practicing in free speech and being this hub for anyone in Philadelphia to learn how to create media that matters to them. And that ranges, from even just like a talk show to narratives to news reporting, whatever it is that, they feel is important and that they want to kind of exercise that right. So we teach people how to do that. Specifically regarding like our Latinx community is that we have our PhilyCAM Latino group, and so we will have special workshops that are bilingual or will be taught in Spanish, where we'll invite instructors to be able to teach those lessons in Spanish, so there's not so much of that gap, as well as translating all of our documents, and also to have this like community space for them to be able to talk about things that are important to them, and that's why we have our Presente, which is our news reporting that is also bilingual, so that they can report on those issues in their communities specifically. But one of the things that when the world was normal and we could go outside more, was that we were trying to specifically target some areas that might not have known about us in Philadelphia, and to inform them of what it is, make sure that our opportunities and our to use our space is affordable and efficient and accessible to everyone as well, but like specifically targeting areas like North Philly where maybe they weren't hearing about us, or maybe they didn't have the documentation in Spanish, so they wouldn't know what that is or why it's important, but also to like kind of bring them into our space that way by going to them specifically.
And Gabe, what are the challenges that you guys have? It's interesting because we go from a community center, Philatinos Radio, and to PhilyCAM, where we have a group of professionals that train the community, right? But I'm sure you have, I mean, I work at PhilyCAM, so I know you guys have a lot of challenges too. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge at PhilyCAM with our PhilyCAM Latino group is kind of like this compartmentalization of them, that they're like almost two PhilyCAMs. And so it becomes really hard to invite like our PhilyCAM Latino producers to come join our events. We want to make sure that we have translators, or we have, the information in the language, and so that they feel comfortable and like it is a space for them. And that's a constant challenge that we have, is like, it's not like this is your PhilyCAM, this is the rest of PhilyCAM. And a part of that too is like with our news program, even though it is bilingual and it is, Latina like producers, we also want like them to report on whatever it is that they care about. It doesn't have to be just Latina issues, like whatever it is that you're passionate about. And I think because they're putting in so much work to fill the gap of what the rest of media isn't doing, that they don't always get to just cover what they are passionate about. And so I think that's the biggest part, is like trying to integrate it and make it so that it's just a normal thing all the time, that yes, there's always going to be, translators, we're always going to have content and the ability for people to get information no matter what the event or the space or the like show is.
And now going to from PhilyCAM to Aldea, which it's a bigger institution, is being around for many years, and has it's known here locally in Philadelphia as one of the most important sources for news. Ericka, I wanted to hear from you about what's the focus of Aldea in what are the strategies to address the needs of the Latinx community?
Yeah, so I would say that what makes Aldea different from the last two that we just heard about is just that it's strictly digital and print. And so, you kind of have to know about Aldea, or have to have like a knowledge of what Aldea is before, because you're not just going to pick up the magazine or like log on to the website unless you already follow them on Twitter, or of them, where to pick up the copy. So I think like ahead to, I know you're going to ask like what the obstacles are. That's like one obstacle I would say is like access. And we probably in the future, it'd be cool to kind of ramp up that kind of outreach to the community, because like you said, Aldea's been around for 25 years, which is awesome. But I've only been here for a year, and I feel like you kind of have to go back and kind of reach out to the community a bit more and be like, this is who we are again, just so that you keep that connection. But yeah, I want to just shout out like two different facets of Aldea that I think make me happy to work there, which is like the culture team, which we have one facet of culture that just focuses on kind of pop culture. But I think the kind of core, piece of our culture team is the writer who focuses on like just local businesses and local restaurants. I want to shout out, her name is Tiffany Rivera, and she, it's something that, I think readers in the community look out for, of just, like which business is going to be, which business that we frequent all the time is going to be featured in Aldea this time. Because then it kind of shows like, oh, there's still, that community aspect. So I'm really happy about, how that's kind of evolved in the past, like I want to say 7 months. It's kind of like felt really new again with the culture aspect. But what I do is politics, and it's kind of, I would say it's like a double-edged sword on what I do, because like at the same time, it's like national politics. So people here probably like don't really like read it as much. But what I'm proud of it for is that it kind of highlights people that people have never heard of in like Congress, or like leaders across the US that are from Latin America or have roots in Latin America, that, you know, it goes beyond, like, if you think about like a Congress member that is from your background, like there's more than just like AOC, who is amazing, but you can't think of them usually, but they're out there and they're doing things that are just like on the same caliber. And so just highlighting those national figures that otherwise wouldn't get coverage has been great. But yeah, the obstacle that comes with that, again, is there's not a lot of coverage out there on these people. So a lot of times I find myself like referencing my own articles because there's such like slim coverage on these people. And so that kind of points to another issue, because like when people, like going back to your first question of just like what's an issue in like mainstream media, is whenever anyone needs a quote for like a national topic that affects people, they always go to like this core set of people that you think of initially, like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, that, you know, they're different, different being like they're not from, you know, your background. So nobody thinks of going to like Nanette Barragan, Teresa Leguer Fernandez, who like nobody's ever heard of, but they're there and they're working for you. And so that's what I'm proud about having done.
Y bueno, la próxima pregunta, the next question, I'd like to know, how does Latinidad play a part in the way that you produce media? Because again, you produce different kind of media. You know, Gabe, she has a show that it's Ghouls next door, which it's really exciting because we don't have a lot of, you know, Latinx producers covering horror stories. So I would like to know, you know, and like some of you guys mentioned, it's not because you're a Latino that you want to always talk about something related to the Latinx community. So how do you negotiate that?
Since you mentioned my show, Ghouls Next Door. So in my show is, you know, specifically where we, you know, dissect and educate on not just like horror content, but also like what the actual story is behind it. For example, like we covered Blood Quantum, which is an indigenous zombie film, but we also covered what the actual practice of blood quantum is, which is where the government registers your blood to see how much percentage of that indigenous population you are, and eventually it'll be diluted enough that they don't have to have any reparations. So that's the horror story, not, you know, the zombies, right? And I think like coming in from the land, like even when I'm covering things that aren't specific to like Latinx culture or community, like my lens is always going to be that, because I'm always asking the question of like, why am I not being represented? Why doesn't that person look like me? Like, why not? Like, why does it, like, why is the default this other thing? And also in my work is that Latinx communities are one of the largest of those who partake in horror and like have like a fascination, like one of the largest audience like members who actually attend, and are drastically underrepresented in that genre specifically. Like it's just very rare that we get that, but we'll eventually, like every now and again we get some really amazing stories that get me excited, like La Llorona from the Guatemalan producers that got all these awards, kind of turning the story of La Llorona and mixing it also with the real trial of the Guatemalan dictator who committed genocide for his people. So it's like, it could be used as a tool to actually educate and also entertain. And that's like the core of what I do. So I think, you know, it's just inherent in this need that I've always had to be represented and to look like critically at media, that I strive to highlight and like show when things are done correctly or right, and like, hey, we need more attention here. But then on the other side, to be able to critique and look at media to see what it's missing, because I'm always looking for those gaps and those holes in no matter what it is that I'm watching, whether it is just entertaining or to learn something from it. So I think that's what you're asking. I hope that was the answer that if I answered it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Like, how do you negotiate Latinidad and being a producer, you know? And also, if you guys can can you tell me your background, Gabe? Because you're descendants.
Yeah, so I'm mixed, but I'm Puerto Rican and then Polish. So it's like, you know, I grew up very much with my mother, who is Polish, but grew up in Puerto Rico for a long time. So it's like this weird mix of not always being seen, but still having that need for community. So that, yeah, that's my background.
Nice. Boricua. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Creo que podemos seguir con Edgar. Edgar, if you don't mind.
Bueno, Gabriela, nosotros hablamos de todos los temas, pero también volviendo a la parte latina, yo no sé todavía cuando en un censo o en un documento me preguntan qué soy, yo no sé si soy latino, si soy mexicano, porque en realidad soy indígena mexicano, ¿no? Entonces se pone más complejo también incluyendo nuestra comunidad mexicana, porque es tan variante, entonces, ¿quién eres tú para hablar de ciertos temas, no? Pero finalmente lo que hacemos es hablar de todos los aspectos de la vida cotidiana de los migrantes de primera generación. Hay cosas tan simples y hay cosas tan complejas. Hay cosas que incluso hacemos la misma crítica dentro de nuestra comunidad al no insertarse poco a poco a su nuevo entorno. Desde también asuntos de que no te dejes intimidar, ¿no? Entonces, realmente es bien interesante porque podemos hablar de cualquier cosa, y siempre tiene una finalidad para que el que nos está escuchando pues se sienta que es parte de esta comunidad. Cuando hablamos, por ejemplo, de nuestras tradiciones, hablamos que tienen que enseñárselas a las demás. Cuando hablamos que algunos se avergüenzan porque vienen de una cultura que según otros no tiene que aportar, les decimos que sus hijos tienen que ser orgullosos de esa parte, ¿no? Y finalmente, cuando hablamos de un tema, le decimos que tenemos 15,000 años de historia, pues que no se compara con algunas otras. Entonces, lo que decimos es importante, lo que hacemos es importante, lo que enseñamos es importante, aunque no tengan un título. Recordemos que la mayoría de la comunidad latina en el sur es del medio rural, en un porcentaje muy grande. Somos del sur de México. Entonces, hablamos a través de nuestro indigenismo, muy orgullosos de hablar náhuatl. Yo no hablo ninguna lengua, pero ese es el tema, ¿no? Hablar de lo que nos pasa desde cualquier perspectiva, desde la más simple hasta los derechos que tenemos como seres humanos en este país.
And it's so great because we have all this mix, you know, Edgar is talking about the first generation of immigrants who identify a lot, mostly with indigenous, right? And how much diversity there is within the Latino community, right? That sometimes you might identify with also with other, you know, with other communities, right? There is the intersectionality of it all. You're not just Latino, but you're Latino and indigenous, you're Latino and you're Black, you're Latino and you're white. So this is so great conversation, and because we have all these different, really different spectrum here. So as a last question, no, sorry, Ericka didn't answer my question, right? Sorry, Ericka. All right, backtrack a little bit.
I was like, oh, okay, it's fine. No, yeah, so the question is, how does my background impact like my reporting? And I really appreciated Edgar's answer, because I feel because I'm relatively new to it, I've only been doing it full time for like a year, almost 2 years, I want to say. So I constantly feel kind of, you kind of feel like you're not good enough sometimes to be covering your community because there's so little people doing it. So sometimes you're wondering, like, why me? Like he said, ¿quién eres tú para hablar de esto? And sometimes I ask myself that all the time. So, because like, I never lived in Mexico, and I know there's a lot of like immigrants that just moved here, and I'm trying to speak about them and like immigration. And I have no idea, like, you know, firsthand what that experience is, but who else is going to write about it? So it's kind of like that feeling, kind of like, it's a sort of like imposter syndrome in a sense sometimes. But then on the other side, it's like, who is going to talk about this? So you kind of feel like you're a reporter, but you're also like an advocate at the same time, which is such a weird kind of like double, you know, identity to have in this space, but it's like the reality.
And puts a lot of pressure on you too.
Exactly. No, yeah, and that's the part that kind of like has me just stop like mid-report. Sometimes I was just like, what am I talking about? Sometimes like, what? But you have to just keep going even though you kind of feel that way. Because at the same time, like there is that constant repeating of like what issues are most pressing right now. During the election, it was just like a constant like, why aren't they addressing this? Why aren't they addressing this? But you have to keep repeating yourself or you'll never eventually get heard. Because one day, you know, we want to think they'll hear us, but you know, until then, it's like you're gonna keep second guessing yourself and keep repeating yourself until they do.
Yeah, it really highlights y de verdad nos muestra que la falta de profesionales impacta a todos, incluso los que están ahí, porque se sienten presionados, ¿verdad? Y se sienten también falta como que un soporte, ¿no? Like, so that's the problem also with the lack of professionals, Latinx professionals, because the ones who are there feel pressure and feel lack of support as well. So that's interesting. And
it's also like, imagine if, you know, others took that same time and thought about that too, and being like, am I doing this right? Am I, you know, who am I to speak on this? Like if more people did that and like we didn't have to, you know, like how great would that be if people took a little more time?
Exactly, because there's a lot of people who are not Latino that report on Latino issues, you know, and they do a really great job, you know. So we don't need to second guess ourselves, you know, we need to maybe find more ways to support each other and encourage and find pathways that will allow us to just be, you know, all that good stuff. So as a last question, what would you recommend to the Latinx community members who want to tell their stories and don't know how?
Nosotros hemos estado haciendo esta plataforma de Philatinos y nos gustaría tener a todos los latinos de Filadelfia contando sus historias. Hace poco tuvimos algunos programas contando historias de puertorriqueños. A veces la comunidad mexicana cree que para el puertorriqueño es muy sencillo porque es un ciudadano estadounidense y no conoce su realidad, no conoce lo que pasa en el norte de Filadelfia. Entonces nosotros le decimos a la gente que venga y cuente. También hemos empezado desde hace mucho tiempo empezar nuestras historias de las aportaciones y no de las tragedias que todo el mundo tiene, ¿no? Y si dentro de ese proceso hay tragedias, pues se cuenta, pero siempre queremos a partir que sea de esas aportaciones. Lo hemos hecho casi en todos los programas los producen los mismos participantes, son de la comunidad, ya están contando sus historias. Ahorita sigo un programa que se llama Talento y Comunidad, de cómo la comunidad cuenta sus historias. Todos tenemos talento, entonces todo el mundo tiene algo que contar. Cuando nosotros empezamos este proyecto, no era porque nos queríamos aislar, no es porque queremos estar en nuestro rincón hablando español, sino porque realmente no había espacios. La televisión cuando pasaba por la calle 9, misteriosamente pasaba de Paz y después seguía hasta Anastasia. Entonces había un espacio ahí habiendo negocios, ¿no? Entonces, ¿qué queremos? Que la gente cuente sus historias de trabajo, de emprendimiento, de arte, de cultura. Entonces, ¿qué le decimos? Que venga a Philatinos Radio y va a encontrar un espacio donde contar sus historias.
Edgar, ¿ya te vas? ¿Quieres dejar un mensaje? ¿Estás escribiendo?
Sí, me tengo que ir porque tengo aquí a los chicos, pero realmente yo estoy muy feliz de que jóvenes como ustedes estén llegando a Filadelfia, haciendo un trabajo que es muy necesario. Al día creo que ha tenido esa capacidad de traer a talentos jóvenes, después no sé qué pasa y se van, pero ahí están. Hoy con Telemundo que está, bueno, ya vienen de otras partes, pero creo que estamos en una muy mejor época en que están viniendo ustedes. Necesitamos que cuenten esas historias que nadie quiere contar en inglés, por ejemplo. Y yo al menos estoy muy feliz de que ustedes estén aquí en Filadelfia trabajando. Ojalá que no solamente se queden un año, sino muchos. Yo llevo como 10 años tratamos de comunicar lo que pasa en la ciudad. Entonces creo que hay muchísimo que contar. Creo que podríamos hacer muchas cosas, tener hasta una plataforma diaria de comunicarnos y no solamente esperar que pase la semana para poder hacer algo. Muchísimas gracias. Yo los dejo porque tengo esperando a mis compañeros ahí, ya me están mirando feo. Gracias.
Gracias, Edgar. Muchas gracias.
Hasta luego.
Thank you. So, what about you guys? What would you recommend to the Latinx community members that want to tell their stories but don't know how?
I'll keep it like kind of like just a few main points. Basically, is just not to sell yourself short, which is something that a lot of us do, and not to second guess like our ability to do what we're currently doing now, which looking back like 2 years, if you told me I was doing this, I would say no way, but like, you know, I'm doing it now. So that kind of says a lot, because, and also like chances are if you're a person of color, you're from these background households, like you've already experienced more than like your peers that are white have like experienced already. Like you have this like firsthand account, you know, there's this like lived experience that they can never like tell or like understand. And I feel like, you know, we kind of, like I said in my first point, don't sell yourself short. We kind of push our like upbringings aside sometimes and just kind of try to move forward. But, and then going back to what I said before and like questioning just my own identity in relation to what I do, is just not to question that as much and not to have that be a barrier in reporting, even though like it's gonna be at times, but just kind of fight against that sometimes. It's good to be aware, but it could be debilitating to your work if you kind of focus on that too much. So yeah, just basically just believe in yourself, is like tacky as that sound, but it's really true, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree completely with what you're saying. As you know, working at PhilyCAM, I always, you know, work to encourage people to come and use what PhilyCAM has to offer. Like that's our whole point, is to, you know, put those tools into your hands so that you can create the content that means something to you, regardless of what it is. And that's a big part of my job as like in working with PhilyCAM is often just helping people feel confident enough in their ability to create, or to feel like their story is important enough to tell, and also to kind of just do it as well. I think is a big challenge. And you know, one of my students had said, do it afraid. And I stand firm in that. It's just like, do it afraid, know that like how much you are like second guessing, triple guessing your place in that space, that there's someone out there who never second guess and just walks around like they own it. Like I had a friend when I was feeling very recently, very similar to the imposter syndrome of like, what am I doing here? How do I, you know, convince everyone else that I belong here, forgetting that I need to also convince myself first. And she simply said, just walk in like you're a white man, like that you have always, you know, thought, like you just never doubted that you belong there. It was just handed to you. So just walk in with that confidence, and because you deserve it. You have every right to be there. You have every right to tell those stories. And, you know, like Ericka said, if like who else is going to tell them? Right? Like if you have that knowledge, you should be the one who's telling them. And there are resources and opportunities throughout the city of Philadelphia to help you do that. So reach out to us. Like I'm putting everybody out there, but definitely reach out to PhilyCAM and at least start there to make those connections and change the trajectory of what media is being right now.
Nice, very nice. No, I totally agree with you guys, and it's you know, there are so many possibilities. I think, you know, when you believe that you can do it and you just follow it, even if you're afraid, even if you're second guessing, you know, I think I'm a living proof that you can do it. You know, I came here, you know, as an immigrant, and I have to restart my career. And I was just mesmerized about the opportunities that, you know, that showed up. And, you know, even with my English not being my best friend now, because Portuguese, I was, you know, versatile and it was excellent. And now I just had to understand that, you know, my English was not the best, but I could bring other skills to the table, and I was going to make sure, you know, those skills are good too. So you know, it's always a good reminder to tell us and other people that look like us, we can do it. And we are here to support each other and use the resources that are available in the city. All right, guys. So thank you so much for being part of Encuentro Virtual. We're going to publish this now during the fall. And for our viewers, please check out Presente Media on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Presente Media Collective, and Twitter at Presente Media. Thank you, Michelle, for assisting with the translation interpreter. And stay tuned. Ciao, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.